Have you ever thought about how some of the biggest changes in American life are kind of like a hidden treasure? Not gold or jewels, but a legacy that's completely reshaped our laws, our culture, and even how we think and talk about love. Well, today we're going on a treasure hunt for that incredible inheritance from LGBTQ activism. So, let's dive in.
So what is this treasure, really? It's not some chest buried in the sand. Nope, it's something way, way bigger. It's a legacy that touches every single one of us, whether we realize it or not.
The treasure is the world we're living in right now. It's the laws on the books, it's the culture we all share, and it's the words we now have to understand who we are and who we love. This whole new landscape, that's the prize, and it was won through decades and decades of struggle.
All right, here's our treasure map. We've got 5 key stops. We'll start by unearthing a hidden past, then watch a riot explode into pride. We'll see how grief was forged into incredible power, understand how American life itself was reshaped, and finally, look at why this fight is far from over.
Okay, our first stop takes us way back, to a time before Stonewall. This was an era when same-sex love was often silenced, so finding proof of queer lives means you have to become a kind of historical detective, always searching for clues hidden in plain sight.
Now this isn't just some friendly little note. This is from the famous poet Walt Whitman to a man named Peter Doyle, and it is just overflowing with love and affection. It's a perfect, tangible example of queer love being expressed behind closed doors when it just couldn't be acknowledged out in the open.
And that's why historians have to learn to read against the grain. You know, publicly, same-sex couples would be written off as just close friends or maybe roommates. But when you dig into their private letters, their personal records, you find the undeniable truth. Romantic language, shared homes, entire lives built on deep intimacy.
And this leads us to our very first discovery. The first piece of our treasure is the simple, powerful, undeniable proof that queer people have always been a part of the American story. Despite every attempt to erase them, they left behind traces of their lives and their loves for us to find.
Okay, so now let's see how that quiet, hidden history builds and builds until it just explodes into a moment of massive visibility. We're heading to the Stonewall Inn, 1969, a flashpoint that dragged the movement out of the shadows and right onto the world stage.
But, and this is so important, Stonewall didn't just happen in a vacuum. For years, decades even, pioneering groups were laying all the groundwork. You had organizations like the Mattachine Society and the Daughters of Bilitis building community, and brave activists like Frank Comedy who were already protesting for equal rights right on the White House's doorstep.
And then came the spark. In 1969, the patrons at the Stonewall Inn, fed up and pushed too far, fought back. And it was a catalyst. I mean, just look at the timeline here. 1 year later, you get the very first Pride March. Just 4 years after that, a huge institutional shift. Homosexuality is no longer classified as a mental illness. The pace of change just went into overdrive.
So the treasure we unearth here? It's visibility, but on a massive, undeniable scale. Stonewall took a movement that had been operating in small, hidden groups and basically threw it into the public square. It was a defiant declaration. We're here, and we are done being quiet.
But that brand new visibility would soon face its absolute darkest test. The AIDS crisis in the 1980s was a time of just unimaginable loss and grief. And yet, out of all that devastation, the movement was reborn, more radical, more confrontational, and ultimately more powerful than ever before.
Just let that quote sink in. It really captures the raw fury of that era. Activists with groups like ACT UP were watching their friends, their partners, their entire communities die, while the government did basically nothing. So they took their grief and turned it into militant, direct action. This was from a protest where they literally threw the ashes of their loved ones onto the White House lawn.
The resistance at this time really had two sides. On one hand, you had this fierce life-or-death confrontation, people chaining themselves to buildings to demand action. And on the other hand, you had these acts of defiant joy, like the annual high heel race in D.C., a community party that kept going even with police trying to shut it down. Both were absolutely essential.
And this reveals two intertwined treasures. First, this incredible, almost magical ability to turn the deepest grief into political power that literally saved lives. And second, the fierce defense of the right to joy, the right to celebrate your existence out loud, especially when times are darkest.
Okay,
Let's zoom out a bit and look at the huge cumulative effect of all this activism. The fight was never just about single issues. It was about fundamentally reshaping the legal and cultural DNA of America itself.
This comparison, it shows one of the most stunning transformations in our history. In 1940, a man named Burt Chapman was locked away in an institution for over 30 years, just for being gay. Then, just 75 years later, well within a single lifetime, the Supreme Court makes same-sex marriage the law of the land. That's not just change, that's a legal revolution.
And the impact goes so far beyond the law. Think about the culture we all share, the air we all breathe, the powerful essays of James Baldwin that changed how we talk about race and identity, the unforgettable music of Leonard Bernstein, the core strategies of the civil rights movement which were shaped by the brilliant organizer Bayard Rustin. These LGBTQ+ figures are foundational to what we think of as American culture.
So, the two massive pieces of treasure we found here? First, a legal system that has been bent, slowly and imperfectly, but bent towards justice. And second, a richer, more honest, and more vibrant national culture that's been shaped by the contributions of queer artists and thinkers.
And that brings our treasure hunt right into the present. Because here's the thing. No victory is ever permanent. The quest for liberation is ongoing, with brand new challenges popping up all the time, especially in the fight for transgender rights and bodily autonomy.
This really lays out the current landscape in black and white. For every historic protection that's been won, like marriage equality or employment protections, a new front opens up. Today, the battles are being fought over access to health care, who gets to play sports, and what our kids are allowed to learn in school. It shows you that progress is never, ever a straight line.
But that spirit of resistance is as alive as ever. This quote from Raquel Willis, a leader in the modern movement for trans liberation, connects today's struggle directly to that long history we've been talking about. The lesson, learned over decades of fighting, is that trying to crush a movement often just makes it stronger. And that is our final and maybe our most important treasure, the continuity of resistance. It's the understanding that this is a generational struggle. The tactics of civil disobedience from ACT UP, the defiant joy from the high heel race, the we're not taking it anymore spirit of Stonewall, those are the same tactics being adapted and used today. The torch is always being passed.
So we've found the treasure. It's the proof of existence, mass visibility, power forged from grief, the fundamental right to joy, transformed laws, a shared culture, and an unbroken chain of resistance. This is the world that we inherit, a world made through struggle. It wasn't given, it was won. And the work is not over. So the final question really is, for all of us, how will we protect and build upon this precious treasure?